How convenient that you live in a consumerist society that's all about hard work and all about just individualism and that's it. If the hard work element as a virtue wasn't there, those people would revolt. And the people in power, the people who are supposedly supposed to have leisure time to be able to come up with great ideas to move humanity forward in the future, they actually have accountability. It's impossible for them to have accountability if everybody believes that hard work is a virtue and then all the workers are working hard and they're proud to be in their chains. And then the elites at the top just clap and be like, yes, these people in their chains, they're so great. I'm gonna tell you a quick little story from my childhood that's gonna directly relate to the video. If it doesn't sound like it makes sense, it will in a second. So when I was younger, my family, we would sometimes go vacation out to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And one of the years that we went there, my brother, my dad, and I found a bunch of crabs on the sand. And we had the brilliant idea of putting all the crabs in a bucket and making them fight each other. And I remember specifically one crab had this like huge giant claw and just mocked everybody. And I named him Genghis Khan because similar to the real life Genghis Khan, he just was undefeated and victorious among all the other crabs. Just ripped off the claws of all the other ones and they died. Cruel stuff, I understand. But something that really fascinated me, and I always remembered to this day that was like really interesting, and I wasn't able to actually put into words why it had such a profound impact on me until I started reading Nietzsche, is that these crabs didn't have to fight each other. All we did is we put them in the bucket and then they just went at it. And sometimes the crab would actually try to leave the bucket and then the other crabs would pull them down. It made no sense, right? If they were smart or if they worked together as a team or if they just didn't hurt one another, then all of the crabs would leave the bucket and it would be fine, right? And then so when I started reading Nietzsche, that thing made sense because it's like, it's not just crabs that do this, humans do this too. And I'm gonna make the argument here that the idea of hard work being a virtue is one of the ways in which humanity actually keeps each other down. I know that sounds strange, right? Because you hear a hardworking middle-class family, or you hear a hard-working lower-class family even that's, working so many hours to put food on the table. Obviously, what makes sense is to be like, hey, praise them for their hard work, right? But funny enough, what you're actually doing there is you're keeping them down and you're keeping the rest of humanity down as well. And well, that's the argument I'm gonna make in this video here, okay? So there's the introduction. Let's actually dive into some text now. So I'm going to be mostly referencing on the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm going to not do a grand overview of it. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. I've even talked about it myself a lot on my channel. That'll take too long. But we are going to focus on one of Nietzsche's most famous ideas, which is master and slave morality. All right, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of that first, and then how that relates to the crabs and how that relates to human nature, okay? One thing I'm going to bring up as well later on is the experiment of Marxism and communism, and how the failure of that, the failure of the implementation of it says a lot about human nature, all right? So Nietzsche starts off with the valuation in the Genealogy of Morals that there were these masters, right? And the masters just called themselves good because, I mean, why not? They could do whatever they want. And what they called bad is just people who weren't like them, people who were weaker than them, people that they subjected, right? So the slaves. And so what the slaves did over time is that the slaves started to be like, no, actually, we're the ones that are good. The things that the masters say are good are actually evil. And so what ended up happening, and this is mostly through first Judaism and then as an extension of that Christianity, is that the slave morality ended up becoming the norm, where the things that the master said were good that were then labeled as evil by the slaves became the norm of our morality for the past 2,000 years, all right? And so let's observe what the masters were like for most of antiquity. The masters, a lot of them believed that they were like descendant from gods. There's this idea even within Christianity itself of the divine right of kings, where like you were chosen by God to be king, therefore you have all these privileges, right? So it's not like that master morality ever completely went away. It still existed even with the advent of Christianity, and especially Christendom in Europe. So if we look to the ancient Greeks, you can actually see this in Plato's Republic, where Socrates talks about how there's people who are born with a golden soul, a silver soul, a bronze soul. Bronze soul is like somebody who's like a farmer, basically a slave. A silver soul is like a warrior, and the gold soul is the noble aristocrat, the philosopher king. And so it was a very common idea within ancient Greece that the philosopher king type people should be separate from society, that they should be living in some sort of leisure to be able to come up with great art, great ideas, and they shouldn't be around like the lower class people that might corrupt them or, you know, they should just be separate, right? And so because of this emphasis on leisure, hard work, labor, doing things that you don't want to do, that's not necessarily something that was praised back in the day. That's something that the slaves were supposed to do. The powerful people, the good people, the noble people weren't supposed to do that because it was a waste of time. However, in the modern day now, if we say something like that, if rich people said, rich elites, politicians, all of them, they still have this slave morality mindset. They're probably not aware that they're using it, especially from a manipulative standpoint, which I'm going to get to in a second. Like if you're a politician, if you want to get any sort of votes, you better be saying like, oh, I'm all for the hardworking American, right? Or else nobody's going to vote for you. If you had the mindset of like, no, I'm great and I'm awesome and I'm smart and I'm talented and I have a great bloodline, therefore I shouldn't work and you guys should work because you're not of the same bloodline as me. Like nobody has that mentality. They just don't. They might have it unconsciously, some of the elites, who knows? I'm willing to bet they actually don't. But if you said that, then nobody's ever going to vote for you, right? And so because Christianity has won out the slave morality, then everybody thinks this way now. Left, right, center, up, right, down, doesn't matter. Everybody from basically all across the world now says that hard work is a good thing. Hard work is virtuous. And so what's the problem with this, right? Okay, everybody says that they worked hard. Hard work is good. What's really the problem with it, right? I'm going to tell you the problem right now because it's much more nefarious than you think, and it's actually holding humanity down for the future. So similar to how the crabs want to take the other crabs down that are escaping the bucket, the idea of hard work is the slave's way of trying to make themselves feel better because they don't have power. And this idea tends to become more and more ubiquitous the more inequality that there is. So you look at most Marxist countries or countries that are influenced by Marxism. I live in a communist country right now, Vietnam. So that's one example, but let's take where it all started in Russia. What was happening, the reason that the communism became, and Leninism more specifically, became so popular is because you had this class of wealthy peasants called the kulaks, which a lot of people were resentful of. And they would say like, oh, well, we're working harder than them. They still have all these resources or whatever. That's not fair, right? And so in order for the common people to make themselves feel more powerful, they would start to say, oh, these people are working, these people don't work hard. Therefore, we're better than them. They are evil. And it's funny because the common people didn't actually come up with this idea. The intellectual elites actually are the ones that came up with this idea of saying like, hey, these people aren't working hard. They don't they're not being equal with their labor, which is a Marxian idea. Therefore, they are evil. You should revolt and rise up against them. And so Nietzsche has this idea of the priest manipulating the herd and to attack their enemies within that same elite class. And that's exactly what happened in Russia, is these intellectual elites would use the kulaks as a scapegoat to gain power for themselves, using the idea of labor as something that's virtuous. And so Marxism, and I don't think Marxism is inherently evil. I think Marx was a brilliant man. He had a lot of great ideas, but these ideas in practice didn't really work if you look across history, because it inevitably, let's say that he was trying to he was full of benevolence, right, Marx, and he had no resentment in his heart or whatever. Let's just say that he did. It would still turn out this way because human beings naturally are resentful. Human beings naturally are the crabs that want to pull the other crabs down from the bucket as soon as they reach the top. And so the problem with hard work is that it is the same idea that the elites use in order to manipulate the common people to start loving their chains. And weirdly enough, in the modern day, I don't think the elites even understand this either. They have like these sort of chains that they think that like they're chained up. So like, oh, I'm part of your group, I work hard too. When in reality, their chains are maybe like made of rubber or something. They can just like, or they're detachable. They can just take them off and do whatever they want and then put them back in whenever the common people or the herd are checking to see like, oh, are you like one of us? They can just pretend. While the rest of us, the common people, actually have these like ironclad steel chains that you can't get out of. And so what's the reason that this is holding back humanity? Well, first of all, this idea of hard work, if we pedestalize it as a virtue, let's be honest, man, people don't want to work hard. They don't want to do things that they don't want to do. A lot of times, if you're being truly honest with yourself, you tell yourself that hard work is virtuous because you don't have a choice. You have to do it. And you do that in order for you to feel better about yourself. Dude, for me right now, I'm working my ass off. I am producing all of these videos because I want to really build this channel up. But the reason that I have to really work my ass off now is because I let my old YouTube channel die rather than keeping it up and repivoting it or whatever. And I made a mistake in that. And so, yes, you, the viewer, you could be like, oh, Kevin, you worked so hard on these videos. I'm so proud of you. Good job. Well, the problem is you shouldn't be complimenting me for that because in a way you're approving a mistake that I made in the past. Instead, and this is actually an aphorism of Nietzsche's. Let me look at it real quickly. So in aphorism 170 in Beyond Good and Evil, he says, praise is more obtrusive than a reproach. The reason that he's saying that is that typically when you're praising somebody, you're actually limiting them from becoming better. Especially if you're putting your stamp of approval on something that doesn't deserve to be commended. And so when I say hard work is for slaves, it's not, I think everybody assumes that slave equals like bad, right? That old master morality interpretation. But if you look at it from a different way of like, okay, well, we're going to have certain periods of our lives where we're kind of more of in a slave mentality. We have to be in order to climb our way out. I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like for me, I need to work hard right now, but I don't think that's something that should be praised. I think it's just something that should be like, well, duh, you want to get from point A to point B, you have to work hard. But let's just say, for example, that you guys just keep complimenting me, like, Kevin, you work so hard. Then my goal is just going to be to work hard all the time rather than producing something great. The goal becomes your praise, your validation, and not actually achieving the thing itself. Let's say that achieving the thing itself just required a lot of discipline or not necessarily just a bunch of brute hard work and labor, just a lot of thinking and meditation and self-reflection and time, and more leisure time, I should say. Well, then should I feel guilty about that? Because I will start feeling guilty about that if I buy into the lie that hard work is inherently virtuous. And so this thing, like most things Nietzsche, is multifaceted. There's no one clear answer, but I'm going to give you sort of a list or sort of a rundown of the things I talked about of why hard work is not inherently virtuous and why it is basically for slaves. The reason it's for slaves, like I said, is because that happened with the transvaluation of values where the slave morality won out in Christianity and Christendom over time, where the masters who thought leisure was good for the masters to have and hard work was for slaves, they inverted that and then they basically said, no, hard work is good. That's why like the meek shall inherit the earth. It's harder for a rich person to get into heaven than to move through the eye of a needle, right? That is that valuation being flipped on its head. And another reason hard work isn't actually good, or it's not inherently good, is because that can actually lead you to being less productive and lead you to less greatness. Because if you're always appealing to the lowest common denominator, if the origin of hard work is from a slave mentality, a reactive mentality of just trying to bring other people down so they can't leave the bucket, then that's not something that's going to be good over time. Over time, all that happens is we're all equal, but we're all equal in chains. If humanity is supposed to move forward over time and progress, shouldn't things like frivolous hard work or just hard work for hard work's sake Like, why? Like, again, this might sound like for some of you that, oh, well, this guy's just being lazy. He's promoting laziness. I'm not promoting laziness. I'm promoting you doing things that you want to do. What's inherent in hard work, what's inherent in labor, is that you're doing something that you don't want to do, that you're forced to do something that you don't want to do. How convenient. Like, if you work your 9-to-5 job or whatever, you just work some job that you hate because you have to pay taxes and you have to do whatever, right? How convenient that society says hard work is good. That's the one thing that's in your control, to be like, oh, well, at least I'm hardworking. That means I'm good. What do you think would happen if the common people said, you know what? Me having to do all this hard work and getting nothing back for it, especially, it's bullshit. I'm not proud of having to work hard. In fact, it's kind of shameful. It's not cool. And this is something that can change if those elites at the top didn't keep messing up the system. What do you think would happen then? Well, what would happen is what happened with all of those communist revolutions. Unfortunately, they had an ideology, a questionable ideology that was leading them, but the result is that they revolted because they're being mistreated, right? But if you have that mentality of hard work is always good, that radical individualism or whatever it is in the West, then you are going to be happy to be in your chains forever. How convenient that you live in a consumerist society that's all about hard work and all about just individualism, and that's it, and says that if you don't work hard, you're freaking lazy. And you know, you put yourself in the position or whatever, even if those things might be true, if the hard work element as a virtue wasn't there, those people would revolt. And the people in power, the people who are supposed to have leisure time to be able to come up with great ideas to move humanity forward in the future, they actually have accountability. It's impossible for them to have accountability if everybody believes that hard work is a virtue, and then all the workers are working hard and they're proud to be in their chains. And then the elites at the top just clap and be like, yes, these people in their chains, they're so great. You have to look beyond that, man. I hope this video makes sense. Whenever talking about Nietzsche, especially extemporaneously like this, it's hard to put into words sometimes, but I hope I did a good job. And I have another video actually talking about hard work not being virtuous. It's an old video. This is a new channel, so old meaning like 2 months ago. But I'm going to link that in the description too, just in case that explanation is a little bit more clear than this one. Anyway, those are my thoughts for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.